We got Aaron Torres with us from the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast and Fox Sports Radio, and social media star overall. AT, we got a long weekend coming up. Are you a go to big event fireworks sort of a guy, or do you just like to hang out with the lovely lady and just enjoy a little quiet time, or are you working this weekend? As sometimes we've got radio to do too.
Yeah, the answer in this case is C. I will be in Fox Sports Radio studios 8 to 11 Eastern, 5 to 8 Pacific, 7 to 10 Arkansas time. But no, it's funny because I usually, if it's a long weekend, I like to do something, whatever. Last year, I vividly remember I couldn't go in studio because we had a COVID scare, so I couldn't work on July 4th, which was a Saturday. And it was either the governor or the mayor made it very clear that fireworks were not to be shot off because apparently somehow that would spread COVID. I don't really follow how that works. And I have never seen more fireworks in 1 year than I did last year. I mean, I literally, I'll never forget, I couldn't go into the studio. So they had, at the time I didn't have a home setup. And so my wife and my sister-in-law, we were playing cards on the deck, just kind of hanging out. It was a nice night. And I mean, I don't want to make this sound like a negative, but it almost sounded like we were in a war zone. And I know you have military listening, and I don't want to be disrespectful of what they do, but it was just crack after crack. I mean, it was nonstop all night long. I've never seen anything like it. And thankfully the COVID numbers did not spike 2 weeks after that. Let's just say that. So
yeah, I remember that. I was in Washington D.C. with my kids for July 4th. We went out and watched fireworks, and I think we were just fine after that too. AT, the transfer portal has exploded for college basketball right now. And it was a little quiet there for a moment. It is quite the opposite of quiet now. I mean, Jaden Shackelford, Kofi Cockburn, O'Banner out of Oral Roberts, Tyrese Radford, and there might be more on the way. I mean, is this about a July 1st deadline, or is there something more to this? Is this about NIL? What do you see?
So it's a great question, Phil. I think it's actually a perfect confluence of events, and let me explain why. So first of all, there is a July 1st deadline, end of day last night, where if you want to transfer, you have to be in the portal by midnight last night. And the reason being the NCAA, obviously I think they're done making rules. I think they're just going to let anybody do whatever they want from now on. But, the idea behind that July 1st deadline was essentially like, we can't have kids, going, in football, for example, into fall camp, losing a roster spot, and 2 days before the season deciding to transfer and expecting to get eligible. And so there is a deadline where there is a one-time transfer. But to be eligible next year as a one-time transfer, you have to be in the portal by the end of the day yesterday. So there's that. There is also the fact, and this doesn't really affect Arkansas, but the NBA draft deadline is once again very, very late in the process. Traditionally, the draft is the first or second week of June, which means most players have to withdraw their name by the end of May. And this year, because the NBA season got pushed back, the finals get pushed back, the draft got pushed back, I believe, to sometime in early August. And so the draft deadline is still in play here. And then third, the name, image, likeness thing, I think, is a real thing. I think there's a lot of kids saying, well, I would have just gone pro and signed for $500,000, but, Trey Burks is signing with PetSmart, so sign me up for that PetSmart money. So, I think it's all of that. But it is funny, Phil, because I'll tell you, I was texting, an assistant coach, somebody, high up in college basketball, somebody that likes to recruit the portal pretty regularly. And I was talking to them probably about 3 weeks ago. I said, so do you think there's going to be an uptick in the portal once we get close to the draft deadline? He's like, nah, man, I think, we're pretty much done now. But, one, I was right, but, not a surprise there. But then two, I tweeted it out yesterday. You take the guys in the portal right now, you have a team that's good enough to win a national championship. So I would love to see somebody that stinks just clear out their roster, start running people off, and bringing in a super team, because there are about 4 or 5 real difference makers that have become available, Phil, just in the last couple of days.
Yeah, Aaron, you brought up the July 7th deadline to pull your name out of the draft, and people doing the transfer right there at the transfer deadline. For everybody that hasn't pulled their name out of the draft, do you expect them all at this point to go ahead and risk it and be eligible for the draft, or do you think we'll still have some more people pull their name out in the next 5 days?
Having done this for a long time, I'll be honest, there's a lot of guys that go up until the last possible second. And it's funny, right before I was on the phone with you guys, I was talking to somebody about somebody that's going to have a really tough decision to make. And I'll say this, I think the decision is tougher this year because of name, image, likeness. And I think there are kids that are trying to wrap their heads around, I can sign for $500,000 next year, but trying to do math in their head, how much could I make if I come back to college?
Mm-hmm.
Is it worth it to make? Can I make 40, 50K between an endorsement deal, cameo, whatever? I don't want to throw out numbers because I don't think any of us know what the numbers are going to look like when it's all said and done. But can I make enough money where it makes sense for me to come back? And so that is where I think the decision gets even tougher this year, but there's still probably 7 or 8, and I'd say even maybe more, about 10, 12 really good players that have really tough decisions to make on if they are going to stay or if they're going to go. I think they'll start to trickle in here over the next couple of days. Obviously, with the holiday weekend, maybe it's a little bit different, but I think we're going to be sitting there right up until, July 7th. I think it's July 7th at midnight. So I don't know if that's, whatever. I think we're still going to have 4, 5, 6 guys up until that last day make that decision. By the way, I would say this really quick, guys, and I'll throw it back to you. The decisions that were made in the 24 to 48 to 72 hours before the draft deadline last year largely shaped college basketball this year. Jared Butler at Baylor at the last minute decided to come back. Corey Kispert in probably the last day or so at Gonzaga. Kofi Coburn, who's now in the portal, and Ayo Dosunmu decided probably in the last day or two to come back to Illinois. Those are maybe 3 of the best teams in college basketball. So these decisions really do have a real tangible impact on the upcoming season. And like I said, there's probably still 4 or 5 guys that are waiting to kind of see where things go from here.
It really does have a big impact on these guys, but you talk about if they're going to be able to make the same amount of money. Also, you think coming back for another year would improve their draft stock, but as we know, every year with there only being 2 rounds and the whole new slew of 18, 19-year-old freshmen coming in, are anybody that you think might be on the fence only looking at the money, or do they think that one more year can improve that draft stock to where, as we know in the NBA, every draft pick means something in dollars?
Well, it's really interesting. I mean, I remember talking to Eric Musselman about this with Isaiah Joe last year, and this was on my podcast. This wasn't an off-the-record comment, so I'm comfortable sharing because it's out there in the public. But, Coach Muss said, Isaiah, you have to understand, I'm not telling you not to go if you believe it's what's best for you. But, if you fall to the second round, you're not just competing with all these guys for one of 30 second-round spots, but you're competing with all 30 guys next year, a bunch of undrafted free agents this year. And so it's a real tough decision. And every guy is a little bit different, right? So, I was talking to somebody. I'll give you a couple examples. So Johnny Juzang, UCLA, maybe a guy that nobody had heard of before the tournament, unless you're just a diehard college basketball fan. He goes off against Michigan. He goes off against Gonzaga. He was, in many ways, one of the stars of the tournament. And maybe outside of Jalen Suggs, he was the star of the tournament.
I'd say so.
And so, that kid, his draft stock might not be great right now. He's still got a lot of things to work on. But I think you have to be realistic about it and say, are things really going to be better? I'm coming off a Final Four run where nobody could stop me. Is now the time to go? But then on the flip side, there's name, image, likeness. I mean, even if he just opens a Cameo account and charges, $75 a pop, I mean, how much money is there to be made just doing that? And is it worth it to come back? I was talking to somebody about, Evan Mobley from USC is a star, but he has a brother named Isaiah Mobley who's really good, might be a second-round pick, but also might not be. But USC also is coming off its deepest NCAA tournament run ever. It was the second time they had made the Elite Eight. And are they going to make the Elite Eight next year? The answer is probably no. And if the answer is no, then what does that mean going forward? So there are so many variables where in some cases, yeah, it's obvious. Come back, do X, Y, and Z, and you'll move up with your draft stock. That happened for a guy like Corey Kispert this year, like Jared Butler this year, like Io DeSumo this year. But then there are also the opposite spectrum of it, too, of a guy like Johnny Juzang who, even if he comes back and even if he's better, by the way, the stock might not be higher just based on how the season ended.
Aaron, I saw where De'Aaron King, the Miami quarterback, signed 4 deals yesterday, but his brother, who's now his agent, says that he will, quote, take care of his linemen, unquote. And that sounds like something that professional quarterbacks do. This is professionalizing college sports in a way without the universities paying these players. But then it becomes there's so much worry about that there's going to be further division in the locker rooms. And I think in some cases that might be a little overblown because, like in a case like De'Aaron King, man, I mean, if he takes care of his linemen the way that NFL quarterbacks do, then maybe there won't be any division, at least not between them, maybe from other sides, but I don't see between those guys.
Well, I'll say this, credit to the maturity of so many guys. Spencer Rattler, I saw say something very similar, the Oklahoma quarterback. I saw Anaya Smith, who's a really talented player at Texas A&M today, say something about, if I get a deal, everyone in the locker room gets a deal. I don't know what kind of money he thinks he's going to get. That's a lot of mouths to feed over there. So, one, it's about, I love the maturity that we're seeing from these guys. Two, credit to a lot of different places where I've been told there's some places that they've been planning for this day for a while, and they have tangibly thought about how are we going to do this so everybody gets a cut. So if, say, and this is just an example, I'm not saying it came from Arkansas, but if, say, Devo Davis runs Devo Davis's basketball camp and he's the most marketable player, does he hire all of his teammates as counselors so that they get a cut of it too? I don't know if Arkansas has thought that far ahead yet. I'm just saying that I have talked to people at schools who are thinking like that. And then the final thing I would say, Phil, on the topic, because I've thought a lot about it, I saw a story about a month ago where Johnny Manziel said that, that autograph fiasco that happened, he made close to $30,000. And I thought about, how it pertains to the idea of dividing a locker room. And what I thought about, Phil, was this, is that take somebody as good as Johnny Manziel, take somebody as good as Devo Davis, take somebody as good as Tim Tebow, whatever. Like, everybody in that locker room knows how good, like with the Johnny Manziel stuff, like, on the one hand, I was like, dude, maybe this would divide the locker room. But on the other hand, I'm like, there's probably a lot of cornerbacks that are, the backup cornerback kind of understands, hey, we're in the top 10 in the country. We just went to Alabama and beat Nick Saban because of number 2 right there. And so, it is a fear, Phil. One, I love that these kids are thinking about how do I take care of my teammates. But on the other side, I think the people that are going to make real money, if we believe that there is real money to be made for the highest level of these, revenue producing sports, so football and basketball, I think there's kind of an understanding of is there going to be maybe jealousy of hypothetically a Devo Davis? I'm not saying it's going to happen, but could that happen hypothetically? Yeah. But I think there's going to be a lot of guys in the locker room saying, well, we're ranked in the top 15 in the preseason because that guy right there put us on our back in many ways in the NCAA tournament. So there's a lot to be unpeeled or, peeled back, Phil. But I also think some of it, I will say, I do believe has been kind of a little bit overblown.
Yeah. I mean, in some cases, and I can end it with this here, you want to get what those guys are getting, get better. In some cases, it really does come down to that. AT, have a great holiday, and we're looking forward to talking about we'll try to talk about some on-court, on-field stuff next week, but I have a feeling this NIL stuff is kind of going to dominate the conversation for a little bit.
I got some bad news, guys. I know we're going to commercial. I am out of the country next week. I'm going to Mexico with the wife. So,
sweet.
So maybe call the hotel and see if you can get a hold of me, okay?
Not at all, man. You have yourself a great time, man. Margaritas and tacos and everything else that you got going on down there. Have a great time, man.
One, it sounds like a Matt Jenkins vacation. Two, I will be back the week after, and it's going to be time to gear up for football, boys. I know we got to go. Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron.
Boy, you got that right. It will definitely be time to gear up for football before you can even blink an eye. Blink an eye and halftime's back. To wrap up the first hour, you can get with us at 877-377-6963.